Welcome back to DemystifySci. This is Needle in the Hay number 3, where we walk around and explore some magnificent mystery. Today we've come to see the Oracle at Delphi, except there is no Oracle anymore.
Apparently, the ethylene gases that Pythia would huff have all gone out due to volcanic activity and seismic activity. And so we don't exactly know what we're going to find. The place feels a little bit like Disneyland, but we figured that we would take you along for the ride. We would explore what it is to come across this ancient center of a world that is completely past now. And yet, at some point, was the most vibrant center of this region of the world.
One of the longest lasting religious institutions on Earth, as far as I can tell. People had been visiting this thing for more than 1,000 years to get information from the universe about the future, about their decision making. And here we are.
And it's crazy because culture after culture took over this place. Like the Romans, the Turks, the Venetians were kind of in there at some point, and people would periodically destroy the place, they would rebuild the place, they would find need for it, they would
They moved an entire town that was built on top of this place.
Yeah, it's crazy because prior to the 1900s, nobody really knew that this was here, which seems kind of weird to me. But anyways, we're going to figure it out. This is our second UNESCO World Heritage Site of this trip. And I was just looking because a car identical to our rental car just drove past. Hopefully that was not, in fact, our car. We will find out. I don't know what we're going to find. There's a huge crowd outside of the front. Hopefully we'll be able to get into some quiet, weird places and explore ideas.
And we are starting our adventure at the appropriate place because all visitors in ancient Delphi would stop by the Estalia Spring, which is just across the street from us. It's not much to look at these days. They won't even let us close to it, unfortunately. There is a modern version of it, so we will stop and get some of the cleansing waters to purify our pilgrimage.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
The scientific revolution starts now.
DemystifySci podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
Well, past the gates. Let's go see what Disneyland has to offer. Delphi Land, actually.
The most ancient Disneyland of all time.
Indeed. Do you think that people came here to have parties, or do you think that it was very somber?
No, it looked like there was a pizza oven down there at the gates. I think it's going to be hard to distinguish the Roman era from the Greek era.
So they had an amphitheater, but they also had a stadium, which means they must have been partying. There's no way that they weren't.
Right. For sure.
So,
And everybody brought tons of food and gifts for the Oracle. Live animals, lots of paintings of people driving herds, not huge herds, but like animals, bull and sheep.
yeah, when we went up to the temple of Aphrodite in Mykonos, it was really interesting because it was a really kind of narrow path to the top. But you would imagine that there would be people who would be driving goats or sheep or some kind of creatures up to the top.
This is definitely Roman looking.
How can you tell?
Because the Greeks didn't do this tiered structure. Maybe some of these bigger blocks are Greek, but the Romans did this kind of patterned clay bricks mixed with stone.
Mm.
I don't know about the columns.
Well, there's a
Is this a black marble or is
basalt? I'm very poorly
You want to go read the
versed.
placard?
Let's go read the placard so we can at least tell the good people what it is they're looking at. Also worth noting just how insane the terrain here is.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a gift shop. You purchased votives and mementos. And then the marble plaques with crosses on display, which we saw over there.
This is Roman era.
You're right.
The platform seems like it might be Greek, though. 500 BC-ish, 5th century. Yeah, you can see the Greek piece blocks. Like these are Greek blocks here.
Yeah, these large blocks are all over the place. The place that we stayed in last night also had a bunch of these, and the city was built on them.
Right. Let's keep walking.
I mean, something that I really am preoccupied by when we come to places like this is the way that centers of commerce and trade and religion fade so completely that th- 1,000 years later, 2,000 years later, there's just tourists walking around gawking. I'm like, how does that happen?
But it was sustained for 1,000 years.
It was, which to me suggests that, okay, well, once you've broken through the first 1,000 years,
This is some cyclopean shit.
Mykina, yeah. Right, so my instinct is I'm like, okay, well, once you've made it past the first 1,000 years, why are you not an eternal civilization at that point?
Well, because the Christian Romans wanted to destroy the place. Who was it, Theodosius or something like that?
I think so. Oh, wow, look, these are all
Prayers or something.
inscriptions, ancient text
Yeah.
here too. I wonder what they were working these with. It's hard stone.
Chisels.
Yeah, probably.
Dink, dink.
Think.
The Greek alphabet really lends itself to the dink dink.
It's very pointy.
There's some curved ones too, but I think they added special chisels for the
Special
curves.
curved chisels.
And then they probably just use half of the curved one for the omegas or
That might be true.
thetas and stuff.
Whoa, look. Doesn't that look just like a foot?
It does, yeah. Maybe someone washed their foot there or something?
They washed their foot so hard that it etched into the stone.
No, it was like a spot where you like put your foot up and somebody washes it ceremonially.
That'd be interesting.
And I'm just making stuff up.
I know, but I love how you make things up. So you have a place that exists for 1,000 years. Why does Rome rise in the first place? It's within its sphere of influence. Did they just not go to Italy? They were seafaring.
Wait, sorry.
Well, it's like, why is there space in Italy for Rome to rise and to come over and destroy the Greeks?
Yeah, like
Oh, look at these nubs.
they kind of their
The
classical period overlapped with the birth of Rome, from what I can tell.
Foti says that anytime that there's nubs, it's indication of casting.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true or not. But these are very regular stones.
I could see it. Especially with these imprints here.
Yeah, I'm like, that kind of looks cast. And then if you look over here, the way that it
But
breaks.
it's cyclopean. These are old.
Well, the Cyclopeans could have been doing it, but like, look, this also kind of breaks in a weird way.
Yeah.
They seem hollow back there.
Everybody hates the geopolymerists. You notice that?
Yeah. Well, because you don't have to have really incredible tools to be a geopolemist.
Like anti-gravity technologies and stuff.
Yeah.
There's another nub. Another nub over here.
Yeah, like tons of nubs.
What's his nub thing? That's where the mold would be
I
injected?
think so, yeah. Or he's like, it doesn't make any sense that you would leave nubs.
See, I think these are a later period than these.
Hard to argue with. But so, okay, the fact that it's a later period than these
But like
suggests that
these
people
look
were
old to
coming
me.
around and were maintaining them. So they
Yeah.
couldn't have wanted to destroy it right away. These actually look like super modern. I'd
Which
actually
ones?
say that this
The
is like
top
20th
ones?
century.
Maybe.
Yeah.
These ones are ancient though.
For sure. But there's been a lot of restoration work here, so it's hard to tell.
These are ancient.
Yeah.
I think that the super square ones are more late Greek, like classic Greek. The really, really small, the really, really square modern looking ones are Roman.
And then these really undulating ones would be Mycenaean era.
That's what I mean, yeah. Yeah, I think the Mycenaeans had a way of carving the stones in place.
And there's caves up there, all the way at the top. There's some kind of ceremonial cave that's like an hour up into those mountains. But anyways, I'm like, okay, so you have the Greeks, massive power, massive social influence. How you have the Athenian academies, you have this grand history of intellect and art and poetry and culture. That's the question that I have, because as long as you have all
Like,
this,
why does the seat of power move to Rome?
yeah.
Yeah, it must be a combination of civil unrest and climate change.
Okay, so civil unrest. Let's start there.
Yeah, well, these people were constantly being attacked by the Turkish ancestors, like the Achaemenid Persians, people from Assyria, right? There's people coming from the east, in other words, or it just seems like at every stage in history they're having to push back against these people.
So you're saying the Turks?
No,
The
not
ancestors of the
exactly.
Turks.
Yeah, the ancestors, because the Islamic stuff was much later, and that was also a disaster too. Because the Venetians were in some sense trying to beat back the Turks. That was much later. That's
Medieval
basically
times,
modern, yeah.
1400s, gunpowder, cannons, everything else.
But I think people from that region-ish, in a broad, wide-scale sense, were threatening the Greek islands for most of Greek history, from what I can tell.
Well, okay, so there's a case to be made that the Greeks were also not necessarily united as a whole, right? Because they were the city-states, they were these disparate groups that had different preferences for their own future and their own protection. And
Right.
so because of the lack of union, it's easy to pick them off and to destabilize the region.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job of repelling the Persians. I mean, I think it's also worth pointing out that Persian is a very loose concept here.
Sure.
Like, the Persians were a little bit of a, what's that game with the ball that you collect everything?
Katamari?
They were a little bit of a Katamari. Like, they grabbed up all the peoples as they rolled through. And if you look at the Persian Empire, by the time they're threatening Greece, it's like most of the Near Asia.
Sure.
They've scooped up all of the local peoples, from the Assyrians to the Turks and everybody. So they had a huge manpower and huge resources at their back. And you're right, the Greeks were a little bit infighting.
Okay. And so then there's this other aspect of this, which is climate. Because
Climate.
if you have a really cohesive group of people that are able to take a look at their environment and they're able to react to changes in the environment in a way that's concerted and focused, then they can probably weather drought, they can weather volcanoes, they can weather a lot of things.
Yeah, drought seems to have been a persistent concern from what I have read. Even the entire narrative surrounding the Eleusinian mysteries is a drought story, from what I can tell.
Can you say more about that?
From what I recall, they would essentially uh, be doing these rituals to placate the fertility gods. And, you know, I think that this is supposed to be a complex devoted to Apollo, and Apollo is also kind of about the seasons, right? Because Apollo is the sun. And so the sun would disappear in the winter. And I believe that the oracle visits would stop in the winter because Apollo would be gone out of the house. So I think they were deeply concerned with the climate and the threat of bad harvests. What are we looking at? Treasury of the Athenians. So these treasuries were also a really interesting piece from what I read. This is where people would deposit their offerings to the oracle. And each city-state from the region, speaking of fragmented city-states, each city-state would build a treasury, this being the best preserved, the Athenian one. And the treasury would house all of the gold and offerings that they would bring. But, you know, every single city-state had one. Phocis had one. Sparta had one. I think we'll find the remnants of these all along the path up to the temple.
It's really small.
Yeah.
Like in terms of being the place where you deposit the riches of your god and
Well,
all of the things that you've brought to them.
I mean, you got to carry them all the way up the mountain. I think a lot of the offerings were livestock too.
So maybe there's not a lot of pens for livestock, but I would assume so.
Well, they slaughter them.
True, but how many you got to feed livestock?
It's even crazier because they slaughter them, and then depending on what the organs look like, determines whether you get to see the oracle or not.
Let's go see those collapsed columns over there. So there's like we were reading that there's a complex process of coming to see the oracle. It's not like you just show up
Oh yeah.
and then just stand in a long line. Like there's this decision about whether or not you're even entitled to go that the priests make on your behalf. And so presumably you have to bring something that the priests want. And so if everybody's brought goats,
Yeah.
and they don't need goats, then they're just going to be like, no, dude, go home.
Maybe.
It seems plausible because these are people that understand what the city needs.
Yeah.
Like, why would they encourage you to bring something that the city doesn't need?
By the way, I think these nubs also function as joiners between different rock structures. Like it's how you lock them together. If you want to see the rest of this episode and other Needle in the Haze like this, you will have to come over to patreon.com/DemystifySci and support the project for as little as 75 cents a week. But you also get a chance to come and kick it with us once a week for our Sunday salon. So I would love to see you over there at patreon.com. And if you can't give right now, that's fine. Support us with a like, a subscribe, tell somebody you know about the podcast. See you next time.